Thunder student Spencer Williams here, going to go ahead and walk and talk you through another subsection from Section 14, Alternative America. So with the rise of political correctness in the 1990s, it meant things that were previously alternative or fringe or on the outskirts of American society, they were now deemed acceptable. This means other subclasses of American society could rise to prominence, carve out their little place in the public domain. One of the most alternative areas, especially in regards to social issues, for the 1990s was gay rights. We, for the most part, see the modern day LGBTQ community born in the 1990s as it started to become more publicly acceptable to be homosexual in the mainstream US of A. We see television shows with gay characters. We see individuals actually coming out to the world on television as homosexuals. Conversations in the news press, through television, through the radio, regarding the adoption of civil rights for lesbians, gays, individuals of the LGBTQ community, all of that, the modern day sense of it, per se, born in the 1990s. Some fascinating situations still revolving around the social issues of gay rights, though, in the 90s, most notably Bill Clinton's Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This topic, along with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, further discussed in the CNN videos that are linked in that calendar doc, so do watch those. But for the sake of time, we're going to keep on moving because the last subsection, I went way too long, so I'm going to try to keep it shorter with this one. Gay rights, though, being gay in America, still seen as relatively taboo in the 1990s. It's accepted or becoming more acceptable in mainstream America throughout the 90s, but it's still frowned upon and can be personally, all right? You don't have to agree with somebody's sexual orientation. You have that right. They also have that right. But in terms of being more public, more seen in the public domain, all right, discussed, okay, not being hidden in the shadows. That's born in the 1990s and really builds through the aughts and the 20-teens with probably maybe the most culminating event in gay rights history, the Supreme Court casting down on limiting gay marriage at the state level to be unconstitutional. Short little video on that here, but again, for sake of time, we're going to go ahead and move along. Alternative, okay, being accepted now in the mainstream with this newly created politically correct world in the 1990s, also seeped into pop culture, where alternative music started to become extremely popular. Watch the Isn't It Ironic episode of CNN's The 90s. Okay, it goes into music, the music industry of the 1990s being extremely diverse, all right? In the 1990s, the music industry was diverse, but also all of those diverse fields extremely successful financially and in terms of creative prowess. We've got hair bands, we've got rock of the 1980s, we have pop of the 1980s, we have hip hop of the 1980s, but all of them have an alternative twist placed upon them in the 1990s, and they're very successful adjustments that were made. As for the rock world, we have the introduction of grunge music from the great Northwest. Watch the episode Isn't It Ironic? It's going to do a great job touching on that, kind of describing how it becomes commercialized, it becomes mainstream, but it's actually the opposite of what was desired by many of those grunge rock enthusiasts. Rap. We'll move on to hip hop. From being kind of politically and socially charged in the 1980s to now being more just representative of the lifestyle. So we've got East Coast versus West Coast. All of that, again, talked about in that episode of Isn't It Ironic from the CNN, the 90s documentary. Definitely need to check that out. But we have an alternative form of hip hop basically now, and that is the world of gangster rap, which then will slide into New Jack Swing. Yes, there is a genre of music known as New Jack Swing. But R&B and hip-hop also has a bit of a renaissance in the late 1990s. But nevertheless, those two genres of music, alt-rock and grunge rock, two distinctly different things here, okay? But grunge rock Gangster rap provides a new, real, authentic, raw version of previous dominant genres of music that do a good job of, again, kind of describing the music culture of America in the 1990s. We also see sports accept this idea of alternative. Okay, we have the birth of the X Games in the 1990s. Skateboarding. I'm trying to think of other skateboarding, and skateboarding. All of that becomes popular in the 1990s. Yours truly would have been rocking it out on Tony Hawk's pro skating. That might have been early aughts. That might have been around in the late 90s, but also early aughts. But the X Games, BMX biking, skateboarding, rises in popularity throughout the 1990s. The WNBA, so professional basketball for females, is born in the 1990s. Soccer gets an additional foothold and attention in the 1990s, and NASCAR becomes a sport of elevation in the 1990s. What was more regionalized for years in regards to soccer being international, not necessarily in our region, internationally speaking, grows enormously throughout the 1990s, most notably because the US of A helped host the World Cup in 1994. NASCAR, which was a nationally regional sport, spectator sport, so mainly in the Southeast, becomes dominant, nationally speaking, throughout the 1990s. So even sports sees a certain level of alteration, okay? What had been maybe massive commercial, bigger-than-life personalities of the 1980s, and modern spectator sport born in the 1980s, we see alternatives provided to us in the 1990s. Should also be of note here for K-State and KU fans, this would have been the time for the greatest K-State football teams of all time, most notably the 1998 squad, has suffered horrendous, catastrophic loss for us K-State fans in St. Louis in 1998. And for KU basketball, probably one of the 2-3 greatest Kansas basketball teams of all time, which also suffered a catastrophic loss in the NCAA tournament under old Deputy Dog, Roy Williams. But that's what we have for the 1990s here in terms of alternative America, the age of alternative music mediums, alternative sports, alternative mindsets and acceptance of social issues, all of that born in this era that sees the birth of political correctness. Now, we'll pick it up next time, talking about America being the lone superpower. So getting back into the world of geopolitics, and then we'll talk about William Jefferson Clinton, the Clinton presidency. So some domestic and foreign policies, some actions, and the political world by our chief executive. Adios.